Thank you so much for joining us today. I know this is kind of out of our normal schedule, but I'm thrilled to be joining you today. I want to say a quick hello to all of the folks that are watching us on Facebook, that are checking in with us on LinkedIn, that might even be watching this on YouTube. And again, I am just so psyched to be on the live this week. And I want to get started by checking in, making sure we all know what time of the year it is. Because y'all, it's February. Application cycle's coming to a close. We're starting to see those deadlines pop up. And you may find yourself sitting there with an application that has not been submitted. And you're trying to decide whether or not it's the best idea to go ahead and apply. You're pretty happy with what you got going on. You like what you're seeing. But you know it's a little late. And that it's getting closer to the end of the cycle than it is to the beginning. Or if you want to put yourself in a really good position by waiting until September. If that's you, first off, don't panic. This is okay, plenty of people apply right now. But we're going to walk through today some of the things that you should consider as you are making this decision. So if you're new, if you haven't tuned in a while, I'm Alice. I'm the Director of Pre-Law Programming at Montgomery Consulting, a brand of Barrier Breakers Incorporated, where we are dedicated to supporting first-gen and minority law law school applicants. Still new, getting used to saying that, but I'm so excited that I do get to say it. And I come to this work with almost a decade of law school admissions experience, and I can tell you with great certainty that I was reading applications in February. The schools that I worked for were making decisions in February. We were still taking in new applications in February, but that's not everybody. And that's okay. So at this point, it really is, if you can apply, for sure. I don't think anybody's deadlines have passed at this point. The earliest ones are usually February 15th, March 1, March 15, those kind of things. So we probably have not hit an actual deadline yet, which is good. But should you apply right now? Or should you wait? The first part of this is going to require you to take some really hard and really deep looks at what your application looks like, where you would consider yourself in relation to other applicants. You're going to have to get really honest with yourself. And that's okay too. I know it's a hard conversation to have, trust me. Sometimes we don't like to be super honest with ourselves, but that's all right. We're going to get through it. I'm going to give you some framework. You're going to ask yourself a couple of questions, and then at the end of those, you should have a pretty good idea of whether or not you should apply to law school in February. So, if you hadn't picked up on it, and if you have never seen any other video that I have ever done for us, or honestly most of the videos that Sydney has done, the answer to whether or not you should apply is always going to be it depends. We don't like black and white in law school admissions. Everything is always nuanced, everything is always case by case, everything is always going to depend on what you look like as an applicant, what the school is looking for. A whole host of factors are going to come into play. So we're going to run through a couple of them. Because for some people, totally fine. Press submit tomorrow, press submit sometime the next week or two, golden. For other people, you may actually be setting yourself up in a much better position if you go ahead and wait. I know it means putting off going into law school. I understand that if you are dead set, this is going to be a tough conversation. But there are lots of benefits to waiting if you find yourself in that situation. So we're going to start first with when it's probably all right to go ahead and just send your application in at this point. And the very first thing that I want you to do is I want you to look at the list of schools that you want to apply to. And I want you to gauge the selectivity of those schools. Because as you should know by now, law schools have rolling admissions. What that means is from the day that the application's open or the day that they say they begin reviewing, looking at you, Harvard, they will continuously review the applications as they come in. And they will release decisions as they finish up that review. So it's not just waiting for one day. March 15, and then at March 15, we look at every application we got this cycle. It's not how we do it. So if it's very selective, the school that you are applying to or the schools that you are planning to apply to, you're not doing yourself any kind of favor by applying right now. If you are applying to a school that is less selective, you may be in better shape. So when I say less selective, I do not mean worse. Selectivity often has something to do with where the school falls on the rankings, that kind of thing, but it does not objectively mean that the school has worse outcomes. It also is going to depend on what you are looking for in your law school, what things are important to you. If you are T14 or bust, cool. Probably not my first suggestion on how to decide which law school is the right law school for you, but that it's your decision to make. I'm happy to provide advice, but you don't have to listen to me. You should, but you don't have to. If you know that you want to go to clerk for the Supreme Court of the United States, T14 is probably going to serve you pretty well. Honestly, we can probably narrow that down to like 3 or 4 schools. But if you want to do like anything other than that, there are some other things that are going to be important as you are making those decisions outside of the rankings. And again, that selectivity piece does not always automatically tie directly to where the school sits in the ranking and what the outcomes are. So for me, I'm in West Virginia. There is one law school in the state. I went there. It's my degree. Up there. Can't read it, but that's okay. If you, like me, are from West Virginia, and unlike me, know that you want to practice anywhere in the state of West Virginia, West Virginia University College of Law is a pretty solid bet. They are not Harvard. But if you are planning to practice in West Virginia, you may be getting a much more dedicated, a much more focused curriculum, and one that's going to help you a lot more in the long run. So again, selectivity does not always mean worse, does not mean better. It's just different. And again, sometimes there is a bit of correlation, but it is not causation with where these schools fall in the rankings, if we can even use the rankings anymore. For those schools that are less selective, and I can say this with experience because I worked at 2 large state schools, we see a ton of our applications this time of year. Probably most of them are coming in the 6 or 8 weeks surrounding right now. And then in the last 24 to 48 hours before whatever the published application deadline is, I need you to pray for the people that process law school applications in that last 24 to 48. It's a beast. Because all of a sudden we are looking at 3 and 4 times the applications that we usually get in a day, if not more. Right on the deadline. We're not going to do that. We're going to play a little before. But if after all of this, you're not totally sure what that selectivity piece is for the school that you are super interested in, first, you can always go look at acceptance rates. Those mean a lot of different things. A higher acceptance rate does not always mean, again, a worse school. Just different metrics. The other thing you can do, and this is what I really, really, really want to drive home for you, because this is one of the things that I used to do a lot, is you can call and ask. There are schools out there that fill their class months before the published deadline. They're not trying to be rude about it. They're not trying to trick applicants by any means. And if you talk to somebody in that office, and as long as you are like kind, again, real people work back there. Please be nice. As long as you are kind as you have that conversation and you're asking them, you call them up and say, look, here's what I've got in my application. I can get it into you in the next 24 hours. What are the odds? Now, none of us are ever going to tell you absolutely yes, absolutely no. But at any point in time during the cycle, I knew what my class looked like. I knew how much space, I knew how much wiggle we had. So if an applicant called me up and said, this is what I've got, this is my plan, what do you think? I can say, you may be better off if you wait. Or why don't you take some time to maybe get another LSAT on that file? I can give you that kind of advice because I know what my class looks like, and I'm not going to hide that from you. I'm also never going to say 100% yes, you should totally apply right now, you're definitely going to get admitted. We don't play those games. It is honestly, I think, so ingrained in my brain at this point to say, now I cannot make any promises, this is what I think may happen. Understand that this is not a guarantee. That's just like tacked on to every piece of advice I ever gave as an admissions officer. It's tacked onto most of the pieces of advice that I give now because it's true. And like I said before, the answer is always it depends. The answer is always case by case. But you can give yourself a pretty good idea. And we are here as admissions officers to help. So you've got the selectivity piece down. You also want to make sure that this is not the very first time you talk to admissions, please. Please. If you have built up a relationship with your admissions officers, and I remember having these conversations with the rest of the admissions committee, I remember going to bat for applicants that were in a position where they may not have been the most competitive applicant, they were coming in a little late, but they had a really compelling reason. If you have maintained or continued a relationship from the time that you started considering law school to the time that you were getting ready to apply, so like right now, you've come to events, you've taken the time to write emails when you have questions, you've been kind, you haven't been a jerk. Seriously, we remember if you were a jerk, don't do that. We are willing to help as much as we can. So if you had a great plan, you were ready to go, we're going to submit your application in October, November, December, whenever, but something happened. Throughout the course of my time in admissions, I have had life situations come up that deal with deployments that weren't planned, kids that weren't planned, illnesses that obviously were not planned, a move, a job loss, whatever it is. We understand that your life just does not stop as you start the law school application process. There are lots of other things that are still very important to you and that you can't just put down and forget about. If we know that, if we have had a chance to get to know you, what I can do after I hear why it is your application had to be pushed, for whatever reason, I can say to my committee, look, this is what's going on. I can't guarantee it's going to change their decision. I can't guarantee it's going to all of a sudden make space for you in the class if there isn't any. But it can't hurt, right? So if I know what's going on, if you've taken the time to get to know me, that I've given me the chance to get to know you as an applicant, I can be helpful. And like I said before, I'm not going to lie to you. It does mean no good. There is no reason for me to say, oh yeah, absolutely, you should totally apply right now. That's great. Love it. Go ahead. Definitely going to get in. When I know that that is not true. Honestly, there is no situation in which I can know that that is not true. Because medians aren't everything. And if we're having that conversation and I haven't seen your application yet, I don't know what your essays look like. I don't know what your letters of recommendation look like. I don't know if there's a super weird character and fitness thing going on. I don't know any of that. All I have is the information that you tell me when we have this conversation. So I can give you a best guess. And again, it's going to be an honest best guess, but it is still going to be a best guess. Now the next piece of trying to decide as you have this conversation with yourself, we've determined what the selectivity situation is. We've determined that there is still probably space in the class. All of that assumes that you are a competitive applicant, and that's what makes it an all right plan for you to go ahead and apply to a slightly less selective school versus one that is very selective. And what I mean when I say competitive is that you are sitting right on or above those medians. On your list, as you are running through your schools, you've got them settled out in selectivity order, whether it's most or to least, I don't care, whatever works for you. But you've got them listed out there. The next thing that you want to start doing is taking a look at those medians. And then you want to compare them to what you're looking at, what you've got to send in. I know I just talked about all of the other pieces that are important in your application. And they are important. Holistic review is a real thing, I do promise that. I can say that one with certainty. Your whole application is considered. But your LSAT or your GRE and your GPA are never not important. They matter. They are important. And if you are sitting below the medians, particularly this time of year, you really want to think about waiting for a couple of reasons. The first one is, like with rolling admissions, the school may not have a lot of wiggle left. You may be a great candidate, but there just isn't space for someone who is sitting 2 points below the median with an all right GPA and nothing that's like superstar status of whatever it is that you are a superstar at. I don't really care what it is. Some superstar quality that you have. We just may not have the space. It may kill me not to be able to admit you. And if we have a relationship, I may call you up as soon as that decision goes out and say, look, here's what I want you to do. Because it is not a you thing, it's a timing thing. Here is how you can strengthen your application and how we can try again. Because I genuinely do want you in my class, I just don't have a place to put you. Most often, because by this time of the year, if you're still in school, you've got one semester left. And you are coming up on halfway through that pretty quickly. Your GPA is probably pretty well settled. If you're out of school, it definitely is. Because regardless of what type of certificate work, graduate work, whatever you have done in addition to your bachelor's degree, doesn't matter for that UGPA. All we're looking at is your bachelor's degree. As soon as that degree is conferred, that calculation stops. It is done. So we're not going to deal with GPA. That one, it is what it is. This is where we live now. But if you choose to wait, you give yourself time to take the LSAT again. If you had 6 more months to prep, what would that do for your score? What would it do if not only were you getting 6 more months to prep, you were also applying super early, like right at the start of the cycle. You are the second application that comes into that school. If it is going to give you a chance to do better in the LSAT, to put yourself in a better place if you wait, I can pretty confidently say you should wait. Just on that metric. Again, there are lots of considerations to take in, and we're going to talk through a couple of more of them, but based solely on whether or not you are a competitive applicant, if taking the time to wait is something that you can do, taking the time to study for the LSAT again, to, I don't know, do something cool, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, Teach for America, whatever. I think most of those are more than 1 year, but still, you get what I'm saying. If you have the time, if you have a chance to do something like that, take the year. Study for the LSAT. Theoretically, you've put your application together pretty much to the end point at this point. And if that's where you're at, you don't have a whole lot of work to do outside of prepping for the LSAT. And once you get that done, it's just sitting there waiting for you to press submit. That is all you need to do. You are just ready to go, very excited, and you are the second applicant that that committee is going to see. We love that. If you are sitting here listening to me right now and saying, Alice, I don't want to wait. I need you to start right now. Okay. If you are sitting here after having watched me talk through all of this and you're saying, Alice, but the internet said that people got in. And Reddit says that there are people that got in and they got scholarship. Sure. Those are the exception, not the rule. If you think you are that person, great. Again, I am never, ever, ever going to say you categorically should not apply right now. By the time you're applying to law school, as far as I'm concerned, you're grown. I can give you my advice. Whether you follow it is entirely up to you. But why not, if you have the ability to, why not put yourself in a better position? Why not make sure you are handing that committee the strongest application that you can possibly put together? Why sell yourself short in that kind of way? Because me, as the person who's reading your application and trying to decide whether or not I want to make space in my law school for you, whether or not I want to see you walk in that door in August or September, and I'm going to be excited that you are in my law school community, I'm expecting your best work. If you are listening to this and you decided that you're going to take the January LSAT, you're going to see how that goes, and then you'll start work, because deadline's in like March. You can put together a couple essays. Can you? Is it going to be your best work? Are you going to have had time to run it by whoever it is that you want to edit it? Are you going to have time to really think through the things that you were putting in that essay? Because after several years of reading them, it's not super difficult to spot someone who threw something together. I don't want your meh work. I want your best work. Because here's the thing. Your best work takes time. It may not take a ton of time. But if you are starting from step 1, or I guess step 2, because you would have had to do LSAT stuff, step 2 now, you do not have time. You don't. The other thing that I pick up as a committee member, and I've talked about this a couple of different times, it looks like you decided you wanted to go to law school on a whim. That you didn't plan for this, you didn't prepare for it, you didn't do the pre-work, basically. And what we want as committee members when we decide to admit a student, we want to feel good about admitting that student. If you decided to do this thing on a whim, I don't feel great. I don't love it. I don't love the way that that makes me feel. I don't love the way that it makes me think that you're going to behave as a law student. I don't love it. Because amongst other things, law school is long. Law school is difficult. It's doable. People do it every year. But it's difficult. And probably most of all, it's expensive. And just like when I see someone who may have put together one piece of a really wonderful application, but there's not enough there to make me think that they are going to be successful in law school, that's part of the reason why I may not decide to admit that student. Because I'm not trying to set you up to fail. If I put you in my class, if I invite you to join me in my law school community as a student, I want to know that you really want to be there. I want to know that you are dedicated to doing the thing, even though it is long and difficult and expensive. And I don't want to feel like I have set you up for failure. Throwing together an application super quickly, again, it shows. And what it shows me is that you didn't put a lot of thought into this, and it is a decision that requires some thought. That's why we're having this conversation right now. That's why I'm giving you all of this advice, because you really need to sit down with yourself, with your family, whoever. It can be just you. That's totally fine. But you have to think through these decisions if this is where you're at in your application cycle. You have to think through whether or not this is the best choice for you. Because you want to put yourself in the best position to be admitted. You want to put yourself in the best position to get scholarship money. You want to put yourself in the best position, full stop. That is what you do when you sit down and you ask yourself these questions and you take a very hard look at what you've got going on for you and what that looks like in comparison to what your law school is looking for. I said the expensive word. You cannot talk about law school without talking about the cost. They don't exist separately. Law school is expensive. This is not new. Lots of law schools give merit-based aid, which is awesome. Most often that's tied to GPA and LSAT. Sometimes there are specific area scholarships, whether it's a public interest focused one or something along those lines. And law schools are pretty generous on the merit aid front. There are also some schools that do need-based aid, which is great. Because again, law school is expensive. So unless you are sitting pretty on a lot of money, and this has been something that was planned for a long time, most folks will qualify for some type of need-based aid, but more law schools offer merit-based, and that budget is finite. When it is given to the admissions office or to the scholarship committee or whoever is in charge of deciding which award goes to which admitted student, there is a bottom of that pot. The goal most of the time is to spend out absolutely as much of that pot as we can, whether we hit the bottom or not, while not putting the law school in some kind of financial trouble. If every student that we award a scholarship to comes, we want to be in good shape to pay that out. Because we made a promise to you when we say, if you maintain this GPA in law school, you maintain this type of involvement, whatever it is, whatever those qualifiers are, whatever those requirements are for you to keep your scholarship, if you do that, we should be able to pay you what we told you we would. Which is why that scholarship budget is finite. When you apply late in the cycle, and this is particularly important for schools that publish priority deadlines, you may be qualified. You may get admitted. But you cannot be given something that does not exist anymore. So if you have set yourself up in such a way, even if you are a qualified student or a qualified applicant, you may still not get scholarship. Not for lack of wanting to give it to you, we just don't have the money. It doesn't exist anymore. Someone else already has it. So in this case, waiting could save you lots of dollars. So me, for example, I didn't have somebody telling me all of this. I submitted my application right on the deadline. Took the very last LSAT I could take. Put, I thought, a lot of work into my personal statement. I think that was the only essay they had at that point, because again, I applied to law school in the dark ages. And I got in, which is awesome. I'm very proud of that. But I now sit on a house's worth of student loans. A whole house that's just there, that maybe I didn't need to do. If someone had been able to tell me there is a reason that you apply early, there is a reason that you take the LSAT more than once if you think you can do better. There are reasons for all of these things. I did not know those. It's a large part of why I do what I do now, because I had nobody to ask these questions to. I didn't know where I could go for this advice. So if anything, don't be like me. Be better as an applicant than I was. Would I trade my law degree for the student loans? Absolutely not. I would not trade my law degree for the world. But it'd be pretty awesome if I didn't have a whole house's worth of student loans to pay back. And I'm very lucky. I've never struggled to pay my student loans. Not everybody is in that situation. So if the financial piece is important to you, if scholarship is critical to your ability to apply to law school, and you are looking at a moderately competitive application for a selective school, waiting may be in your best interest. If you aren't planning to go into a job that is going to make you lots of money, if you are worried at any point, and we talk about this in a lot of other videos, break it down super clearly, very detailed. This is not the time for that. But if you are worried about that, please consider waiting. Applying early in the cycle, again, qualified or not for scholarship, you still stand a better chance. Who knows what the scholarship criteria is going to be for the school that you apply to next year? It may change. They don't usually change a ton year over year, but they do change sometimes. So waiting may mean the difference in 3 bedrooms worth of loans. Sitting out and sending in your application early can save you anywhere from $70,000 to $200,000, depending on what school you go to, what the cost of living is, what your scholarship ends up being. All of that stuff goes into this, and you can save yourself so much money if you just take the time to think through whether or not it is you want to wait. For the folks that happen to be tuning in today, or watch this later, where money's not a consideration for whatever reason, whether you are independently wealthy, awesome, whether you are having your law school financed by an outside party, whether it is the GI Bill, it's an outside scholarship fund, it's a firm or something like that. I don't think that happens very often anymore, but at one point it was a thing that happened sometimes. I love that for you. I am so excited that you don't have to worry about that. And if that is the case and you are determined, and you think that you are a competitive applicant, you are happy with your chances at this point in time in the year, okay, you can go ahead and send your application in. Worst case scenario, the answer comes back no, and you're out an application fee. And whatever you decide to spend, whether it's another LSAT or whatever, you can go ahead and apply if the money is not quite as important a piece for you. But that's not everyone. And you may still find a good reason. You might still find a compelling reason. Whether it's, I want to add another school to my law school list. I do think I want to go ahead and shoot my shot at a T14. Maybe Harvard will let me in. Maybe Columbia will let me in. Stanford sounds really cool. I can probably bump that LSAT up a bit. My GPA is fine. Maybe if I take that time, even though the money doesn't matter, maybe if I take that time to work on my application, to do a little bit more research, I may find that there's a school that I hadn't even considered that feels like home to me for law school. So you can apply if you choose to. But there is still benefit in waiting. I know it's difficult to have the conversation where you look at all of these things and you take that really, really brutally honest look at whether or not you, who are more than likely very good at lots of things, most folks that are applying to law school are pretty good at school also. Having to settle into the fact that you may not be the most competitive, you may not be the college superstar that you thought you were. It's all right. It does not mean that you do not have value. It just means that you need to think about whether or not now is the time to apply to law school And take a minute to just kind of sit in it so it doesn't sting quite as much. Because let me tell you, sometimes those first year grades in law school, they're gonna sting. Sooner you're comfortable with that, the better you are come January. It is still very worth it to have this conversation with yourself, to think through all of these things, to make sure that you are putting yourself in the absolute best spot possible. You are giving yourself the absolute best chance to get into law school. You have done a lot of work to get here. Why stop now? Why sell yourself short when you are almost at the end? If it is hard now, it may be easier later. So have this hard talk with yourself. Take this hard look. And then make your decisions about whether or not now is the time to apply to law school, or if you do need to wait a little bit, or you do choose to wait a little bit. You don't need to, but you still want to. That's fine too. I have every faith that you are going to be an absolutely fabulous attorney in your future. I know that you can have this hard conversation. I know that you can make this hard decision in the best way for you. And I hope that running through these questions is helpful. So I'm going to take a minute. I've talked a lot. See if anybody has any questions from the chat or in the comments. And while I'm looking at that, we'll hang for a minute. I think we're doing okay. All right. So it doesn't look like we have any questions. That's okay. Totally fine with me. But to wrap up, you want to take 3 questions in mind as you start having the conversation about whether or not you should apply to law school in February. So number 1, how selective are the law schools that you want to apply to? Again, selectivity does not mean worse. Less selective schools can still have really great outcomes. It depends on what is important to you. Oh, we did have a question come in. Crystal has asked, does that apply to part-time programs deadlines as well? Yes. One of the things that can sometimes happen as this conversation is being had, particularly with admissions officers in schools that have part-time programs, whether they are very large, robust, the part-time student population is almost the same as the full-time student population. It may be wise to wait on that front also. Lots of schools don't differentiate between the part-time and the full-time statistics, so that competitiveness level, that selectivity level, they may not change. But that is a school-by-school thing. So as you're talking to an admissions officer, they may say, hey, so what I'm seeing here means that you may not be in your best position to go ahead and apply to a full-time program, but we have this evening program. We haven't filled it yet. There's more space. If this is something that you think you can work through, and sometimes law schools have these great programs where you start as a part-time student, you do really well, you think, maybe I don't need to keep the job that I was working at, maybe all of a sudden I have more time, whatever it is, you can switch up to full-time. One of the schools that I worked for did something very similar to that. It wasn't an evening program, so you were still in school in the day, but you took about half the credit hours, and as soon as you felt comfortable bumping up to full-time, you were allowed to. But they do fill in a similar way. They just may be working on a slightly different timeline. Again, if you are ever questioning that, if you are ever not sure, chat to your admissions officers. They're going to be the most helpful person for you. They know all of this. They are not trying to hide the ball with any of this. Their job at this point is to help you make an informed decision. Hope that answers your question. Feel free to add more. I will absolutely interrupt myself to answer them. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. That is the most important thing to me. So we're going to look at how competitive your schools are, how selective your schools are. You're going to ask yourself, how competitive am I? The next thing you're going to ask is, how important is cost? Will waiting mean more money that I don't have to pay back? There is no hardline answer here. There's never going to be one. As much as I wish there were, there just won't ever be one. Be honest with yourself as you're having this conversation. be proud that you've already put in a lot of work and you are taking the time to have hard conversations to make sure that this comes out as best as possible, as great as possible. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I know we are out of schedule a little bit, but I'm super glad that I got to be a part of it today. If you have any questions at all that you didn't get the chance to answer, or you're watching this later on, you can submit them to bit.ly/breakintolawschool, and we'll answer them on the next show. If this has been helpful, if you liked the video, please like and subscribe, maybe share it with a friend. And I'll see y'all soon. I love the faces I make when I'm trying to find the thing to stop this.